This Social Security measure gives at least some protection.
For anybody to hand this out, we're asking for a chance to have the people who will receive the benefit to earn their way. The same principle established under the Social Security system in this country.
It is no longer acceptable to discuss women's rights as separate from human rights.
I know we can come together to face down the challenges of our own time.
Welcome back. We are having a special edition of Democrats today, where we interview Democratic candidates on the ballot. And our special guest today is the candidate for the District 5 Executive Council seat, Debora Pignatelli. Welcome, Debora.
Hi. Thank you very much.
Thanks
It's good
for
to
being
be here. Thank you for having this show for us to get the word out about who we are.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thanks for giving us that opening. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I am a longtime resident of Nashua. We've been here over 40 years. I was the first executive director of the Girls Club, now Girls Incorporated, and also the tenant services director for the Nashua Housing Authority before I ran for political office. And we have raised two boys, Adam and Ben, who grew up, graduated from local schools, and are now off on their own. In 1986, I ran for the House of Representatives. They just told me, they asked me to put my name on the ballot, said, don't worry, you're not going to win. We just need to have your name on the ballot. And lo and behold, I won. And I served 5 years there. I loved it.
Right.
I absolutely loved being in the House. And then I ran for the Senate, the state Senate, in 1992 and served for 10 years there.
Wow.
And yeah, it seems like a long time, doesn't it? But it went by quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And I liked that. I enjoyed the process of making laws and seeing how they were made. And I would encourage everyone to run for the House at least one term in New Hampshire.
It's a citizen legislature. We need all the help we can get.
Exactly.
Lately, you certainly do.
And you've been on the Executive Council before.
I ran for the Executive Council in 2004 and beat the gentleman who I'm running against now. In 2010, he beat me in this race, and I'm looking to get back. I really loved the job. I thought I did a good job at it, and I'd like to get back in.
Tell our viewers what the Executive Council does. I think a lot of people see it on the ballot every 2 years, but they don't really know what their function is.
And you're right. Hardly anybody knows what the Executive Council does. It is a very important job, and it is very powerful, and hardly anyone knows what we do. But we have a basic distrust of government in the state. We have a very weak governorship. The governor needs 3 of the 5 of us executive councilors to vote with him or her to do almost anything.
Yeah.
He can't appoint, or she can't appoint, judicial nominees, agency heads, spend any money over $10,000, issue any pardons. The 10-year highway plan starts with the Executive Council. We hold public hearings around the state. So as you can see, we have a big responsibility, and it is very obscure. And we are the only state in this country that has an Executive Council like this.
There's only 5 of you, and you've served there for, what you said, 3 terms?
6 years, yeah. 3
Yeah.
terms.
So what are some of the big issues that would impact Nashua that have come before the Executive Council that you have a different perspective than your opponent?
Well, there are 4 or 5 where I would disagree with my opponent strongly. The first one is the feasibility study for rail. I was very happy when I heard that we were going to study rail, possibly, depending on what the study said, move forward with rail from Nashua to Lowell to Boston, perhaps go eventually up to the Manchester airport. I saw it as a big economic development opportunity for the state of New Hampshire. And certainly the airport, having rail to the airport, would bring Massachusetts people who can't get to Logan because of its complications in getting there to come to Manchester. My opponent was the deciding vote against taking this federal money to even study rail. Now, whether you're in favor of rail or not, shouldn't we have a study? Shouldn't we find out whether it's feasible, whether it's going to be an economic boon to the state? But my opponent and 2 of his colleagues on the Executive Council turned down this money. If I am reelected, I will do everything I can to try to obtain this money again to do the study. I understand that the money might be available until 2013. So on my first day after election, I would make a call to our U.S. senators and our U.S. Department of Transportation to see if there's any way we could obtain that money. Now, the Chamber of Commerce was in favor of this.
Right.
The mayor was in favor of it. The Board of Aldermen were in favor of it. And the majority of residents are in favor of at least studying rail. And my opponent, before he even cast a vote, never came to Nashua to talk to the Board of Aldermen, never talked to the mayor, even though the mayor and the board had reached out to him several times to please come, please listen to our perspective on this. Right. The Chamber of Commerce had wanted Mr. Wheeler to come and listen to the Chamber's strong support of this, but you couldn't shoehorn him out of Milford, where he lives.
Right. Deb, what other issues that are really important to Nashua that come before the Executive Council? There are many, but list a couple more for us.
One of the contracts that came to the council this last year, and again, my opponent cast the deciding vote against taking the money, was to shut down the Planned Parenthood clinics all over the state. This is the only way many women and some men get their health care services. Cancer screenings, birth control, regular physical health checkups.
Yeah.
And this was a bad vote by my opponent. If I were on the council, we wouldn't have done that, and I would have been the deciding vote in favor of keeping them. We have a RGGI program in the Northeast.
You better explain that.
Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative.
Yep,
it's to look at alternative ways of providing electrical service
Right. Yeah,
to
sure.
our residents. And my opponent cast the deciding vote against having 4 projects that passed the legislature, passed the Senate 24-0. One of those projects was in Greenville, in Councilor Wheeler's district. So I would have voted to keep RGGI. I think it's a good process. I think we need to look at alternatives to oil in the state, and I think that solar, wind, geothermal, hydro are good opportunities for the state to look at. I would vote to protect victims of domestic violence. I would vote to protect victims of child abuse and neglect. My opponent continually votes against funding for those and for training workers who go out and investigate domestic violence and child abuse and neglect claims.
What about the judicial appointments? Have any of them been controversial? Would you have voted differently?
They have for my opponent. The governor nominated Jim Bassett to be a Supreme Court justice in the state of New Hampshire.
Highly regarded attorney.
Very highly regarded attorney. I've known Jim Bassett for years. He, by the way, is a Republican, not a Democrat, and he will make us a wonderful justice on the Supreme Court. My opponent voted against it because Jim Bassett would not tell my opponent how he was going to rule on a certain case, which is, you know, it's totally inappropriate to ask a nominee how they're going to rule on a case before they even have heard the arguments on either side.
Disqualify them from, yes, right.
Right.
So it's, yeah.
So there is a stark contrast between my opponent and me. I also might tell your viewers that I'm Nashua's own. I live in Nashua. I represent Nashua. I stopped the toll booths way back.
I was going to get to that. That's
yeah.
right.
Yeah.
That's a big one because it is so important. There are only 5 districts for executive counselor, and Nashua is the 2nd largest city in the state. And if we're disenfranchised from that important body, it affects it. And why don't you tell us a little bit about the story, because it kind of raised its head a little bit this last year. I think we put the fire back down, but there are those that wanted to put a toll booth at exit 1 on the Mass border, which of course would affect all of Nashua residents going to and fro. And you led the charge on the council to oppose that. And in the
well,
Senate.
it was in the Senate when I was back in the Senate. The toll booths were already built. The infrastructure was already built underneath the road to have the toll booths. And I got wind that they were going to go up, and I spent the whole the whole time I was in the Senate that year, working with my colleagues, trying to convince them that we didn't want to have a toll booth in Nashua. We had just spent $165 million to expand Route 3. It made no sense to have cars have to come to a complete stop and pay a toll.
Right.
And besides, I dislike toll booths. They're an environmental hazard, and they are a safety concern.
Right.
So I managed to get appointed to the Committee of Conference, which works out the differences between the House and the Senate. And even though the language was still in the 10-year highway plan, because of my sitting on that committee, I was able to get that language out, and we all signed off on it, and the toll booths were killed. I also worked hard to bring the Division of Motor Vehicles office to Nashua. It didn't make any sense to me that the second largest city would not have a place that you could go and get your driver's license, and that we would go out of town to do that. So I brought it to the Exit 6.
Where it is today.
Where it is today.
And it's very happy there.
Yeah, it's very successful there. And we are no longer paying rent because it's a state-owned building.
Well, I'm sure there have been others in the history of New Hampshire that have served in Nashua as state representatives, senators, and executive councilors, but I don't know of any, and there's not alive today except for you. So that's quite a distinction. It really is.
Yeah. Well, I'm happy. I loved serving. I liked serving in my communities. I liked going out to the communities, meeting with our Board of Aldermen in Nashua and other boards of selectmen, and especially helping residents when they had problems with a state agency. They would call me, although I don't know why they couldn't just call you, but they would end up
and
calling
so many
me.
Of
I'm
us.
sure that you got your share of calls too, but I really enjoyed being able to help people with problems with the state agency.
It is really the most fun part of the job, I think.
Yeah.
Rewarding for sure.
It is.
Well, I like campaigning almost as much as I like serving.
Well, you must be the only one.
You've got a big district. Tell us about your district. What does it encompass?
Well, we were redistricted this year. You know, every 10 years, your viewers probably know that every 10 years we have a census taken, and then we go through a redistricting process. Right. And although we didn't need to redistrict in the Executive Council because the districts were fine in terms of population, the Tea Party Republicans in the House and the Senate redistricted this district so that I no longer have Keene and Hinsdale and Winchester, towns in the city of Keene that have been with Nashua for over 100 years in this Executive Council district. They've gone to another district, and I have several new towns, Hudson and Litchfield, and some towns just south and west of Concord that I've never had before, a couple I've never heard of before.
So
we each have
different kind of voting electorate.
So you've got a battle, as we all do.
Yes, some easier than others.
Yes, absolutely.
But Nashua is still really the most important part of District 5, the biggest population center. So
it is, and I am working very hard in Nashua to get the word out about what I've done and what I'm capable of doing and how I will represent Nashua's interests.
And that's so important versus someone who lives elsewhere in the district but doesn't have Nashua's interests at heart.
Well, yeah, I mean, you can live elsewhere in the district, and if you're willing to represent Nashua and come over here from time to time and meet with people, that's fine. But my opponent refuses to do that, even though he has been called and invited.
Right, I understand that. There's been no response.
Right. MIA, as the Telegraph says.
Well, we have run out of time, but it's been great having you here. This has been a special edition of The Democrats. We've been talking with Executive Council candidate Debora Pignatelli, for my co-host David Campbell, and myself. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks. Goodbye.